Hello fellow gaijins, welcome back to the Japanese Basics for Beginners series. In today's episode we will look at new, exciting and really useful grammar, so you know the drill. Let's get right into it. Today I want to look at the T, the N and the M hiragana. So in total we look at 16 of them today. Again, the pronunciations are exactly the same as with the katakana. Don't forget that the T has a dakuten version, which is the D hiragana. Today's vocabulary consists mostly of verbs and adjectives because nouns by themselves don't really help you to build good and useful sentences. 仕事わかる子供長い別奥住む働く高い安い難しいもっと帰る入る出るFor the word betsu, I want to point out that when you are in a restaurant and you want to tell the waiter that you want to pay separately, you can just use this word and say betsu onegai shimasu. Betsu just means separately if you use it in contexts like this. It's really useful if you are with friends and you don't really want to have the hassle of somebody having to collect money from everybody after you went out of the restaurant. So if you go to Japan, definitely keep this word in mind. In today's grammar, we will finally look at the rest of the verbs in past tense, so all the verbs that are not iru or eru verbs. Now, it is kind of a lot to remember, but it's actually not that hard after you've remembered how to conjugate the single verb families, because you use verbs in almost every sentence, so getting used to it is really easy. Just remember that the hiragana at the end of the verb usually decides what conjugation you have to use. Here's a chart of the verb endings and what they become after being conjugated. The ru, u, and tsu endings become ta, which is a double T ta, so it has a little tsu in between the verb stem and the ending. A good example for this is the word kau. You can just take away the u and add ta, well, it's just ta, but it's a very strong T. And then it will become informal past tense, so katta. One thing I want to mention at this point is that kaeru is not an iru-eru verb. It's the word for going home that you've learned in the vocabulary part, and it has an eru at the end of the word, but it's just an exception. So if you conjugate kaeru into past tense, it's kaetta, so you have the little tsu. Now for the verbs that end on tsu, it's exactly the same. Now I don't really remember if we had any examples for this, but I will just take matsu, which means to wait, and it becomes matta. If a verb ends on su, like hanasu, then you take away the su and put shita at the end of the verb. So hanasu becomes hanashita. Mu, bu, and nu all become nda. We had the word sumu in the vocabulary part. Sumu means to live, and it becomes sunda in past tense. Take away the mu and add nda. The same happens for verbs that end on bu and on nu. The last type we have is the ones that end on ku and gu. The ones that end on ku have the ku removed and ita added. The ones that end on gu, it's almost the same, but it's not an ita, but an ida. So the dakuten kind of carries over into the past tense. We had the verb hataraku in the vocabulary part, and this becomes hataraita. Again, slowly, hataraita. The three kind of strange exceptions are suru, kuru, and iku. Suru and kuru are almost every time exceptions when you talk about conjugations, but iku is usually not. In this case, iku just becomes ita. I guess this has to do with the i at the beginning of the verb, which would be strange if you put ita at the end. It would be just ita, and I don't know, this just doesn't sound right. So I guess the Japanese just thought it has to be ita. Suru and kuru become shita and kita respectively. Now you can actually conjugate all the verbs that exist in Japanese into informal past tense. The next thing I want to look at is the mashou form of verbs. What exactly does this mashou form do? Let's make a quick example by taking taberu. Tabemasu is the formal form, and then you take the mas away and add mashou, and it just becomes tabemashou. You can do this for any verb. Tabemashou just means let's eat. So whatever verb you take, if you put the mashou at the end of it, it just becomes let's. If you take iku, for example, it just becomes ikimashou. If you take kau, which is kaimasu as a formal form, it becomes kaimashou. Pretty easy, right? The next thing I want to talk about is the past form of adjectives and also their negative form in the past. If you want to say it was delicious, how do you say that? You take oishii, take away the last I, and then add katta. It just becomes oishikatta. Now this was an example for an I adjective. You can do this for all I adjectives the same. Atarashii becomes atarashikatta. Kawaii, kawaikatta. Takai, takakatta. Now if you look at the na adjectives, it's even easier. It's just the same as with nouns. So you just use the past form of this. Now that was easy enough, right? Let's look at the negative past adjective form. Let's look at I adjectives first. If you take oishii, for example, and make it negative, it's just oishikunai. We've covered this. Now, if you want to make oishikunai past tense, you just take away the last i and add katta, as before. It just becomes oishikunakatta, atarashikunakatta, kawaiikunakatta. So, it wasn't cute, it wasn't delicious, it wasn't new, and so on. Now to get to the adjectives, it's the same as before. You take the des, negative past form, and add it at the end. For example, kirei jarimasen deshita. That's all of it. Just learn those 4 conjugations and you can say a lot more in the past tense. The next thing I want to talk about is a very, very small grammar topic, but it is super important if you want to sound much more natural when you talk Japanese. In a situation where you talk with a lot of people that know what you're talking about, you can replace nouns with the particle no. Now, how does this work? For example, my friend says, Kino inu o katta. And then he talks a lot more about his dog. Now, I have a dog too. And I just want to say mine without saying the word dog. Because in English you can do the same, right? You say, mine is bigger than yours. If you want to say this in Japanese, you can just say, watashi no wa. Watashi no wa. So, I just replaced the watashi no inu with just no. So you can just leave the inu away. It probably takes a bit of getting used to it, but it's really, really useful and very easy to actually apply. You just take away the noun and just leave the no where it is, and it just sounds more natural, I guess. But you can only use this when people actually know what you're talking about. Just remember that because it will come up a lot in the future. The last grammar topic for today is the word toki. Toki basically means time. It also uses the same kanji as the ji in jikan. Now, why is the word toki useful? It's useful because you can say when I did that, or when I will do that, or when I do that in general, something happens, something happened, and so on. For example, when I bought the book, I saw a dog. Hon o katta toki, inu o mita. I don't really remember if we know the word miru, which means to see, but I think we do. So yeah, miru means to see. You can also use this with adjectives and nouns. So it's basically used the same like when you modify other nouns, like with verbs, with adjectives, or with nouns. So if you use a noun in front of toki, you have to say noun no toki. For example, gakusei no toki. It just means when I was a student. Kodomo no toki, when I was a child. Also, the same with adjectives. Oishii toki, kawaii toki. One thing that is very important with toki is that the tense doesn't really matter when you use nouns or adjectives. So the whole sentence can be in past, but this portion of the sentence, so kawaii toki, is always in normal tense. So it's not in past tense, even though the whole sentence is. For example, inu wa wakai toki kawaikatta. As you can see, the kawaii is just in standard form. It's not in past tense as you would expect, because in English we would say when the dog was young, he was cute. but you don't do this in Japanese. But when using a verb in front of Toki, it's a little bit different. There is a difference when using a verb when you talk in past or in present tense. When you use a present tense verb in front of Toki, it basically means that something happens while or before you do something. For example, 寝るとき、おやすみと言います。You is always used with the particle to. Now this is an example for when something happens before you do something, but you can also say 日本に行くとき、そばを買った。Now, 行くとき implies that you were going, so you were still going to Japan when you bought the soba. You weren't there yet. Now, if you say 日本に行ったとき、そばを買った means that you arrived there and then you bought soba. That's the difference. So past tense verbs usually imply that something ended and then you did something. It kind of makes sense because it's in past tense, right? So something ended and then you did something. 犬を飼ったとき、そばも買った。So after buying the dog, I also bought soba. So it's basically when I bought the dog, it's a little bit like after buying him, so I already bought him, but when I bought him, I also bought soba. I know this is kind of confusing, but when I'm in Japan and talk Japanese with my girlfriend, for example, and my friends, I never really notice this. But it's important to know the difference because of contextual stuff that might happen while having a conversation with somebody who actually uses those things correctly. That was already all of the grammar I wanted to cover today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new today. If you like this episode, throw those shurikens all over the like button. I will not tell you to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Mata ne!